Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of Hey, Where Did the Decades Go? And a shameless plug of my book, my memoirs, Hey, Where Did the Decades Go? And then I'm holding up that book is my brother Greg, who's been helping me as he has through his whole life, doing fun stuff. And he and I are going to revisit a subject that came up in one of our last videos, and that was the subject of smoking.
Hmm.
And if you remember, Greg, the bingo parlor,
The
and
bingo
how,
parlor story in the book.
yep,
Oh,
how filled
quote the
with
book
smoke
again.
and
There we
every,
go.
everybody's choking and carrying on with the smoke. We thought we'd just talk about how smoking was accepted then. And Greg, I think that on more than one occasion, Mom had you go out and to retrieve said. So if you want to revisit that,
Yeah, it's as you look back the hundreds of years that we've been alive, and you go back and you look and
at
see
least.
what how things have changed. And one of the things was my brother and I, Mark and myself, probably my brother, younger brother Gary too, but I'm not sure. But definitely the two of us. When we were old enough, there was and everybody smoked. Everybody, I mean, baby smoked, dog smoked. I mean, everybody smoked because it was all the rage. We're talking late 60s, 70s. Well, it started changing in the 70s, but yeah, suffice to say in the beginning. And so everybody wanted cigs. So the when mom or dad ran out of cigs and didn't want to go to a supermarket, which of course was way across town, Mark. It was like at least 45,000 miles away. But what we could do is we could ride our bikes up to the local uh, convenience store or a quickie mart. And of course, back then there were quickie marts, but run by some guy that, well, we can get to that story another day. But, anyways, they sold cigarettes. So you'd hop on your bike and you would ride up to the store, which wasn't that far away. And you go in and you have some money from mom and you would say, I need a pack of cigs or a carton of cigs. Of course, back then it was like $2 or $3 or whatever the heck it was. And they would sell it to you. And I was like 10, 9,
It,
7,
parts of
8.
that parts of
I
that
mean, it's
story
just
was
little.
you
And of
had.
course, they knew you after a while because they know okay, we know who you are. You're Sally's son, so blah, blah, blah. Not that I don't think it ever really made a difference. I mean, back then, they didn't care who they sold to. It's like, hey, you want a pack, you want beer? That's something else. But cigs, oh, yeah, we'll sell you cigs.
I think one of the things when you say you rode your bike, where we lived, it was what we called a busy street. It was a two-lane main drag
It
through
was a
town.
busy street
So you don't
with a
have to
big
worry about,
intersection in it.
yeah, you don't have to worry about pesky bike lanes or sidewalks. So
Ugh.
you risked your neck riding in the rubble on the side of the road, hoping that your tires didn't kick out and you end up getting dropped in front of the car. But yeah, that was one of the differences was that, yeah, here's some money. Don't lose it, because if you lose that money, it's big trouble. And
Ugh.
and on
Oh,
one of
two
those
bucks was a
trips,
lot of
Greg,
money back
something
then.
care to relive on one of those trips, something that happened to you as you were going to get something other than cigarettes?
Oh, yes, there's a funny story here. It's one of the times, and of course, you didn't just go for cigarettes, Mark. You go for all kinds of things. And one of the times I was sent up to, I was supposed to get a loaf of bread. So she gave me a quarter or a dime or whatever it was for a loaf of bread at the time. And I ride my bike up to the store, la la la. Probably I don't know how old that was. We'll say 10. And I get there, and I get like a loaf of bread. Here's my dime for my loaf of bread, and off I go back home. And I'm riding along, la la la. And then I don't know how this. So the bike that I had at the time, the handlebars were short, so you're holding on tight to the front. And I had one hand on my bike on the handlebar, one hand holding the loaf of bread. And I went to grab both handles, I'm sure. And as I go to grab both handles, because I'm probably about to die or something like that, the bread slips. I'm still holding on to it, but the bread goes over and it gets stuck in the spokes of the bike. Bread everywhere. And as I'm looking down, all I can see is the bread sliding down through the bag because it's the bottom of the bag got ripped off from the spokes, and it's just all the bread is sliding down through the bag. And of course, you're on a busy road, there's traffic, and you're trying to stop the bread from flying away and stuff like that. I
Birds
remember
are
getting
coming.
home, and all you have is the little piece of the, where the twist tie is, that
The
hold
time.
that, and and the plastic, and no bread.
Not even the heels.
And I said to mom, I'm like, Mom, I said, and of course of course you feel bad. I'm like, oh, Mom, sorry, a so bad. I don't think I cried, but she's like, but guess what? Got another quarter up to the gut bread, and this time I did not have it going to.
We weren't smart enough back then to have a book bag to put the bread in because you couldn't crush
Oh
it.
no, Mark, please.
And
It
the
was a
yeah,
banana bike or something like that. It's like,
no, you're not going to
I
have
mean,
a
we didn't have
sissy
baskets
basket
either.
on the front, or I'm surprised you didn't have somebody sitting on the back or on the handlebars that would hold the bread.
Well, that
They
would
would
have been a
risk
good
their
idea.
lives for
I
that
could have
loaf
had
of
Gary
bread.
do it.
Yeah, Gary, get on the front and we're going to ride in traffic and try to dodge the cars and try to go through an intersection, as you said earlier, not get
Actually, it is
killed.
amazing that nobody got hurt. I mean, all of our friends, we had tons of friends and stuff like that. They used to use that road going up there, but we digress because
Somehow we got off
we
traffic.
got
It's
off
argue,
kilter
but
here.
the
And
but one of
Mark,
the
you maybe go off kilter.
yes,
And
again, Greg, I'm blaming you. One of the machines that was readily available that eventually we'll figure out how to get a picture of it was a cigarette machine. And on it would be a dire warning that you had to be at least 75 years old to use this machine
mhm.
or have the
Yep.
required change. And it sounds like if it was for today's prices at $7 or $8 a pack, that'd be a lot of change. But back then, as Greg said, it was like 50 cents or something would give you a package of cigarettes, and you just had to be able to pull the one there and whatever the 5 or 6 or 10 brands they had at the time. One would dispense out there with matches because they knew
Yeah.
you needed matches, so it was pretty
It
common.
was amazing because it had this weird machine too that you drop all your change in because of course nobody had credit cards then. So you drop all your change into the machine, and then you have this big lever you pull out, and what it does is it pulls the cigarette pack out so it falls down and you get it. And of course anybody could do it. I mean, there's no, you know, as long as you had the money. And it's
Nobody
usually at a
cared.
bar or it's at a not a convenience store, but it's at a bar or someplace where you would not necessarily, you don't have easy access because you're all of a sudden you're out of smokes. I'm gonna get more
That
smokes.
was a crisis because if you think of our house, Nanner, we would be at dinner and mom and dad and Nanner all smoking. And Nanner
Yeah.
had couldn't use the ashtray where she was smoking. She would put the cigarette out in her food after she was done. So that was delightful when you were the one who got to scrape the plates after dinner that Nanner
Yeah,
gave you
but
that little
Mark, it was so
bonus.
smart. It put the cigarette out. How easy is that?
Well, and speaking of Nanner, she smoked from when she was maybe 8 years old till after 100 when she passed. But her fingers were so yellow because for a while the government came up with this program that you'd only smoke halfway down, and you would draw an imaginary red line around the cigarette. Of course, they were filterless, and that way the worst stuff was still in the cigarette. And of course, Nanner took that as a personal affront, wasting money, and would smoke right down to her fingers. So she could literally go to a birthday cake and put out all the candles. Didn't matter how many you had, 80, 90, like
Oy.
for you. And she could just put them all out with her fingers and not even bat an eye. So that was one of her, keen tricks. Nanner had a lot of things that were interesting, but yeah, yeah, and it
I think
looked
I
like
could
it'd
do
be
that,
painful.
except the crying and the whining soon after that would be, and then my fingers would be broken for at least a week because I have baby soft fingers, Mark. They would never be able to do that. In
That's
case you
because
didn't need to know that,
you're
I
not
knew I know
smoking
you
enough
need to know
filterless
that.
cigarettes. The other time when our parents would smoke was just about any time, but it was in the car as well. And if it was
Oh
cold out,
Jesus, yeah,
you
that's right.
wouldn't. Yeah, would the station wagon, which was a gigantic vehicle, would fill with smoke, and we'd beg for a window to get cracked. And on one
Even in the
occasion,
winter.
yeah, even in the winter, it was terrible being inside. It was nice that there was no seat belts in the back seat or the back of the car. You just tumbled
Mark,
around.
please,
But
they
that's
were they were not required,
no seat belts are
and it's not
something to
like
say.
anybody gets into an accident back then.
No.
We
There's
have this
never any
car
worry
made out
about.
of a solid chunk of steel that has absolutely no absorption at all. Or maybe with the airbags. Oh no, there's no airbags. No, maybe it's the dog that's sitting in your lap would help you. No, the dog's not.
You could
Yeah,
rely
you,
on the
you used to we used to
unreliability.
jump back. Oh, it's a different story.
Here we go off on cars, but
Yeah, we're gonna go off
uh,
on tangent here. We gotta stick to the script, which we don't
yeah,
have.
okay, stay to the smoking. Now, in future years, we were living in our current abode. And one of our friends of our family was traveling by golf cart, as a group, about 10 kids and 3 or 4 golf carts were all together. And on one 6 passenger golf cart, we had roughly 7 kids because they all wanted to be together, plus this one gal. And she's smoking and she's holding her arm out away. Her arm is maybe 2 feet long, like a T-Rex, and she's holding it away. And the my son-in-law, who was a smoker at the time, goes, "It's not 1974. You got to, you can't smoke around kids." And her answer was, "I have my arm out," which was like, this is, I don't understand what the fuss is. So we've come a
Oh,
long
Mark,
way
I was trying to
from that.
explain these things to you.
Yeah, it just seems
But
to fall terribly short. But
you
that
can
was,
remember too, like back in the when mom and dad and Nana would smoke. I mean, they like you said, they smoked in the house. I mean, you just smoked everywhere. It didn't matter. And there was always ashtrays. They were always full. And, I mean, how we didn't burn the house down by throwing out a hot cigarette into the garbage or something like that. It's beyond me. But yeah, everybody used to, it was just normal. And, we were growing up. I mean, I think there's a bit in the story about I think every kid in the world tries, at least back then, took a cigarette and tried to smoke at some place and got sick or did this or did that. And it's just because it was so gross. And but yeah, but everybody smoked. It was a weird thing. And it was, you look back on it, you're just like, how do I not have that explains why I have asthma. Hmm. But
it was like
uh
the transition time when people started getting away from smoking, because the government at one time told us that our scientists told us that it was good for you to smoke. So we were helping our tobacco farmer friends. And once that kind of fell by the wayside, they would put up a sign in a restaurant saying closed to smoking. Or the best one was in an airplane, where from 12 back was smoking and 12 forward was not smoking. So
sounds
being
good
in
to
that
me.
tube, with the smokers was just great. And of course, now if you go in there and if you were to light up a cigarette or even vape, of course, I know somebody who vapes on the plane and tries to hide it, so I'm sure nobody knows the smoke. But
Yeah.
oh, yeah,
It's the but yeah, but at the restaurants and stuff, it was funny because I mean, I can remember it went on for quite some time where you had smoking and non-smoking. And literally you could be sitting in one booth here and then the booth right next to you because it passed that invisible line that goes all the way to the ceiling and doesn't allow the cigarette smoke to go from one side to the other. And you'd be over there and be like, "Bleh," because it's but the people behind you, hey, I'm in the smoke station. Don't crap on me. And then you mentioned about the airplanes. I can remember flying to California. Man, I think I was like 12. And it's like, oh my God. I'm like, it stinks. I mean, because everybody and their brother, because it's like 800-hour flight. And, this is back in the day when they had, I mean, I think they actually even had cigarettes on the plane that people could smoke. And of course, mom was happy because, she could smoke the whole time. And so did everybody else. And there's no crack in a window, Mark. And open.
Yes, the kids will be fine.
And they
It'll
said
make
they
they're
had
happier.
filters in there to filter out the smoke. A bunch of BS. They did not. They just said that, But and they even the pilots in there. So, of course, they have the doors open then to the pilots, and they're smoking in there.
The
And it's just a funny. It was a well. Thank God we've gotten away from that. But in
It
most
was even
respects,
when I first joined the service for the first probably 10 years, the every when they give you a packet of food to eat when you're on deployed or something, every meal had 4 cigarettes in it, plus matches, because they knew most soldiers smoked. In fact, I think I was the only one, so I sold the cigarettes. I think there was like $1 a piece because the people were going nuts for the nicotine, and that made it pretty easy to
hmm,
sell those. But
we had
I
a
think that
dollar off Uncle Sam, Mark.
yeah, poor Uncle
We're going
Sam.
to
There are
jail.
always some off-brand. In fact, when it was during Desert Storm and it was in resupply mode at some point, our tobacco friends would send us cases of cigarettes. And a lot of people who didn't smoke took smoking up because, well, if I'm going to get killed, I might as well smoke. If you make it through, then I guess you can worry about trying to quit. But yeah,
True.
another time for another place. But yeah, that was the ashtrays. And it was easy when our kids went through the phase of smoking. When they would come in, they thought they were so smart. But if you don't smoke, the smell in the hair and the clothes is not something you're going to get rid of very easily. So it was
Yeah,
pretty
everybody. It's
great.
always stuck to everybody. And the other thing that was always back in the day, every car had an ashtray. It was in the car. It was built
Oh, it had
in.
a cigarette
You don't
lighter.
even have those anymore. And they had a lighter.
Yep.
And the lighter was funny because you shove. It's like, well, it's hard to say, but
You depress.
yeah, it just push it in. It got hot somehow. Magic. There's a little fire back there. And then you pull it out and you shove the cigarette in your mouth and it just heats it. It just heats it enough to light it up. And then when you're done with the cigarette, of course, even to this day, you just throw the cigarette out the window. But back then, when you had an ashtray, what you would do is you would fill the ashtray completely full. And then when you're at the supermarket, you take the ashtray and you dump it on the ground. I can remember all the time walking through the freaking parking lot and
There's
saying,
little
there's little
mounds of
piles of
ashes.
cigarettes all over the place. And I can remember back then when I was a kid, I'm like, this is disgusting. I mean, what the hell? You can't take this crap home, throw it out. You throw it
Isn't
in the
this
parking lot?
littering?
And it
Is
was,
that why that
I
Native
mean, we
American
get
is
cigarette butts
crying?
now, but
I think
jeez.
that's why that Native American was crying on that mountain. He was looking down at a parking lot at a grocery store and saw all those mounds of ashes going, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
I can't
And it was just
believe this
like,
is happening.
but that was what people did. I mean, yes, it wasn't right to throw them on the ground. It's kind of like now, like you throw your lottery tickets on the ground, you throw your nip bottles on the ground. But the back then, so all these big piles of cigarette butts all over the place. And I don't remember mom ever doing that, but and it was cool too because the ashtray, you pull the ashtray out, and it was the sliding thing in the dashboard. You pulled it out, and you couldn't take the whole mechanism out, but that little tray that had the cigarette
It's
butts in it
removable.
would pull out, and you can whip it out the window.
Or just hold it up and the ash would fly out.
And
I
it's
was
like, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, this is, and these kind of crazy things that went on
so
back in
at
our
one
time.
point that I was
Boy,
with in a barracks two-man room in a army building, and I wake up in the middle of the night and here's this guy coughing and hacking it, and he wasn't that much older than me, but he was having a tough time just breathing. And in the dark, he of course he's coughing and hacking away, and we're not going to turn the light on because there's only one bulb. And he's coughing and hacking. Then he finally, I hear him open up his canteen and drink some water, and then I hear whoosh, as the lighter comes on and he lights up. And I'm
well, you need a
thinking,
cigarette, Mark.
yeah, he needed a cigarette after all that hacking. So there's no cause and effect, Greg. It's completely,
Nope.
that
Nope.
was just
Back then it was totally fine, which was
so
probably what, 1982?
somewhere, yeah, somewhere around in there. Yeah. So it was
I'll say 82,
perfectly
Mark,
a-okay.
just
And as a
because.
matter of fact, when he used to go to the parking lots of grocery stores, but he never got around to dumping the ashes on the ground. So his car literally had a mountain of ashes between the seats, so nobody would ever get in the car
Good
because
for
you
him.
knew you're going to be coated with ashes, which was an anti-theft device because no one
True.
would steal that car.
True.
But now, dear viewers, if you would like, you can respond back to this YouTube channel, or leave a comment about your own adventures or what's your experiences with smoking. And we hope you enjoyed this banter between my brother and I as much
Probably
as you
not.
enjoyed doing it. And if you didn't, well, we'll try
Yeah.
harder next time.
I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was awful.
Greg, I think you've had a history of that.
A history.
A
Oh,
history.
don't start with me, young man. Just because
Yeah.
we've been brothers for so long.
Yeah, at least that's what they tell us. So now with that, dear viewer,
Goodbye.
thank you.
Till
Have a great
till
day.
next time.